Hello guys, last week I've published a challenge for you to clean up this route mess. So in PHP Storm it looks something like this. You performed quite well. I received in total currently at the time of shooting this video it's 57 pull requests. It may be more, so well done. And in this video I will summarize a few of you. It's not the winners, but a few pull requests that I've noticed that are better ones, and I will discuss the details of their solutions and comment on them. It doesn't mean that if you participated in this challenge that your solution is worse. Just compare your own to the ones that I will be talking about now. I didn't have enough time to view all the pull requests. My colleague Narius helped me with some of that, but I had really small amount of online time last week for family reasons, so I will just shorten this video to reviewing a few pull requests, and let's see how to make this route file better. And by the way, this video will be useful for those of you who didn't participate in the challenge or didn't even see that. So how to format this route file better, a few or a dozen of tips in this video. So first, of course, probably everyone noticed and everyone did that, is the namespaces of the controllers. Instead of doing that all long path every time, we should move that probably to use on top. And probably everyone did it. So like use app HTTP home controller here on top. So yeah, something like this, and then you don't need the full path here. But a few extra things I want to mention here. Did you know that, for example, so if you need, for example, one controller, another controller from the same folder, let's show you. I've learned that myself from one of your pull requests. That is a cool trick. So home controller, book controller, and others. And then you don't need that full book controller here and there. So if you have like 10 controllers, it's kind of a mess then on top. So use a lot of statements. Did you know that you can do use, then folder, app HTTP controllers, like this, and then add all the controllers inside of that controller as list here. So home controller, book controller, whatever other controller. So you don't need to have this, you can do it shorter. Cool, right? For that tip, I want to thank username JT Jonathan Tarnite from Philippines. So he did it like this in separated routes admin like this, and then in routes web like this. The next almost obvious part would be grouping these things into route resources. So get post, get put, delete, all of that can be grouped into route resources. And again, many of you did that. One example of that is this pull request, and for example, route resource book with only methods of create, store, and show replaces these three lines: get, post, and get here. They are all attached to book controller here. Again, we can remove that, and we have one line instead of three lines, and also it is scoped with book as slug. So instead of doing book slug here, you can have a scoped method on route resource. It's not always convenient to group that into resource. For example, if you have only two routes, it's a philosophical question for you. So should it be route resource settings, for example, for only index and update? It's your choice. Another interesting thing about route resources, maybe some of you don't know, you can override the default names of the routes. So default route name is books.index for the index method, but you can override it because in the initial route list, the book list is specifically with the name user.book.list, not .index. It's not really advisable to override because sticking to the standards is a good practice, but in this case, it was for the demonstration of feature on route resource like this one. Another similar example of another pull request, also grouping in route resource, also with only with names, but in this case that names looks like the default ones, but anyway using the same feature of route resources and route grouping. Only if you have only partial route resource with only some methods, you can define only create store, or for example like in this case, route resource except one method of show. So we've talked about grouping individual routes into route resources. Now let's talk about one level up grouping, so grouping routes and resources into route groups. And a lot of you did that as well, so instead of that long list, it should be like 3 or 4 route groups. And when you need to introduce route groups, when you see the pattern of same settings for different routes. So for example, same middleware, same prefix for the route names, so user.something or books.something or admin.something. So again, if we go back to a few examples of grouping, there also can be group within a group. So take a look at this example. route middleware auth, so this group is protected by auth middleware, but part of that group has prefix of user. And there are, by the way, two prefixes. So prefix user means the URL, so /user/anything, and as user dot means route name. So you can point to those routes as users.books.something. So user.books.list in this case, for example. And while looking at your pull requests, I've seen various grouping ways, and there's no one correct or good way, but in any case, grouping of the routes is really good practice, and that makes the routes file shorter. And final thing I want to mention in this video is separation of some routes into separate routes file. So routes web PHP is by default the file for all the routes, but you can create your own separate routes whatever and then register that in route service provider. So some of you did it, and in the original file name in the routes web, it's kind of obvious that some routes are for admin. So some of you separated those into a separate file like this one. So for example, routes admin PHP, again with route resources with some grouping, but wait, we don't see route group here. Why? Because some settings you can define for all the file in the route service provider. Let's take a look. So you need to register that in route service provider, and this code is by default in Laravel that registers routes web file, but then you can register routes whatever, as I said, defining also the parameters for all that file. So name of the routes admin.whatever, then prefix is again the URL admin/something, the namespace is the same as routes web. And this is important, you can define middleware for the whole routes file, not only for route group. It actually works in a similar fashion to route group, so you can move this part into route group of your routes file or define it, as I said, for the whole file on top in route service provider. I guess that's it for this video. These are various topics and various places I wanted to mention. If you have more free time, I advise you to go through those pull requests and see how various people implemented that changes. You may engage in discussions, ask them why. It's also a good practice to learn from other people's code, which is written pretty fresh and they are in the mood of discussing why and when and how. And I will do more challenges like this one in the future. Anything more interesting I've missed in this video from those pull requests? Shoot in the comments below and let's discuss. And also subscribe to the channel to get daily videos, including challenges which you may participate in. See you guys in other videos.